Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Gardener's Shed podcast. In this episode today, guys, well, I'm going to be having a chat with you about the year so far. So we're going to be looking back at some of the highlights of the 2025 gardening season. Talk a little bit about low points. There wasn't many, to be fair, but I'll talk about that a little bit towards the end. But I think first off, I'm going to have a chat with you about what's been going on this week. I think with anything, there's always things not going wrong, but there's always things happening, I think. So let's get on with it then. So I had a start of the week. I had a telephone call off one of my customers' daughters, and she lives, way down south. And she said to me that basically, could you, cutting a long story short, could you get up to my father's place as quickly as possible? He's had a bad fall. He's got somebody with him, but she's in hysterics, and basically get up there and see what you can do. Now, this customer, I'll be honest with you, this is the unforeseen part of this job, and I suppose it depends on who you are and how much notice you pay or how much interaction you have with customers. There's some customers that I think I've only ever met them a few times. There's customers that, and they're not even in this country when I go. But then there's customers that I've worked for a long time that we have sort of built up, in air quotes, rapport, and we're not friends, but we're as close to friends. I always say you can't be friends with your customers, especially when money's involved, but we're as close as friends as we can be without being friends. And he's a really nice guy, and without getting morbid, when I took his garden on, he was able to hobble around his property, and he was all right. But he slowly got worse and worse and worse. And I think this fall is going to be, as horrible as it sounds, the coffin nail. So he had a fall, he's broken his arm, and now he's broken his arm. He can't use his walker, so that means his mobility is going to go down. But, well, it is what it is, I suppose. So when I got there, his missus was, in a bit of a pickle because she's got dementia. So I'm got some form of first aid training, but not enough. We made sure he was comfortable. We made sure the ambulance were coming. We made sure he was wrapped up. So somebody stayed with him, and I went and distracted the missus. And then luckily another family member turned up. But it just shows, really, and it just shows, and I said to the daughter, I said, look, if ever you need anything, I don't mind at all. Obviously, I don't want to step into a role as a carer. That's not my thing. And I can't commit time to it. But in an emergency, and I've said this to my friends and family, that if ever you need me, there is no job that I can't drop. Even if I'm halfway through a job, I can just leave it, because if you need a hand, you need a hand at the end of the day. And that's what she did, and they're very grateful for it. And this guy, he's helped me. I think I've told you this story before. So a few years ago, when I had that perforated bowel, I was in hospital for a couple of weeks. And you know what? He rung up to see how I was. He rung my parents up, and then when I was out of hospital, he wasn't pestering, but he'd ring up every week, ask how I am, and he'd always say to me, "Don't worry about work. There's work here for you." And he did, and he honoured that. He kept all the hedges and all the grass for me. And then when I got back, I cracked on with it, basically. And bless him, he was like, look, I only want you doing 2 hours a day. I don't want you doing too much. And he did, and he honoured that. So, yeah, so like I said, I think this is one of the takeaway points on this season, is this season's been the worst season for deaths, unfortunately. And I think when you've got an aged customer base, it does happen, unfortunately. But anyway, we'll get away from this miserable talk. I talked a bit morbid last week. So this month, it's the end of the month now, so when this comes out, it's going to be the 1st of December. So the decorations on 1st of December Eve, they will be up in the camper van. I am looking forward to Christmas. November has been a very good month. I know already it's been the best month for the business ever. It's been the best November ever. It's been really, really good. I don't know what I've got some work booked in for December, but I don't 100% no, fully. I am planning at some point to getting a out and about in a camper van. And also, I always have in the back of my head that I break up around about halfway through December. So, a week before Christmas, I tend to break up. I am looking forward to it, to breaking up. I'm looking forward to having some time off, if I'm being honest with you. And I'm saying to myself that, so I have got things in the background. So one of the things I've been doing this year is I say to myself, work your 5 days and then you have your 2 days off. So work Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. If it is that I've got to work on a day on a Sunday, I'll try and take a day in lieu, as in I'll try and finish half a day, and it does help. And I say to myself, work your 5 days, and if you finish early, say if you get rained off or you just finish a job early, you will do something productive for the business in that time, and then you clock off at your time. And then that allows for me to have the 2 days or the 1 day off guilt-free. And it's the only way I've found to sort of do this, because I am a bit of a workaholic. So when it is that I do break up, I'm going to say to myself, because there is stuff behind the scenes that needs doing, and there will be little bits of work here and there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to book out work days and holiday days, as sad as it sounds. I'm going to book myself, 4 days of holiday, 3 days of work, or 5 days of holiday, 3 days, 2 days of work. And then with that, I'm going to sort of book some activities. I'm a very routine orientated person. I like looking forward to things. One of my favourite pastimes is going to the cinema. So on my work diary, I've actually wrote in when films are out. I love the cinema, absolutely. And for me, it's a complete disconnect. You've just got 2 hours to watch a film, and I like that. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the winter, is just, filling my time. But for the business, if I book 2 days of work in that 2 days, I've got tasks. So I've got to photograph some of the equipment to sell. I've got to service the equipment. I've got to clean the container out. I've got to get the solar panels up on the roof for next season. There's plenty of stuff to be doing. There really, really is. One of the videos I've got planned for next season is, so I'm going to be living a more off-grid lifestyle. So as such, I need a reliable way of getting electricity to charge my batteries. So I'm going to do a video on that. So I'm going to do a little build out, a little Victron build out. And it's going to be as close to a copy and paste sort of video where, if you need, off-grid power in your container, don't get me wrong, it will be expensive. It'll probably be about $2,000 with all the stuff that you need. But what that'll give you is that'll give you the power to charge batteries, run a diesel heater, switch your lights on and off in your container, you name it. It'll be a complete off-grid setup. So I'm going to do something like that next season, I think. So again, I'll be getting the ingredients for that, fixing, servicing, but all of that's got to be done within the time that I book off, because I'm a bugger for idle hands, and I think, I'll go and look for something to do, and then I end up procrastinating. So if I say to myself, I've got 5 days off, 4 days off, then I will stick to it. As well, there's plenty of things. So I've managed, so my tax pot's sorted. As much as it pains me, that's ready to go out. I've got my winter fund tucked away, and I've also got some personal spends tucked away as well, in case there's an emergency on the personal front, also for Christmas presents and stuff like that. And then I've got money tucked away in the business pot as well. So we're all right, really. There's food in the cupboards over winter. We're not going to have to resort to anything. The budget has been and gone. I always, never ever, and I do feel a bit ashamed for this, I've always treated politics and budgets and whatever as it won't affect me, and that's how I've sorted it. I've just thought it won't affect me, and it has, and it is, and it's going to keep affecting me. This year I've never ever spent so much. I've never earned so much this year. I've never spent so much, in a year, but I've also never spent as much on tax. Unfortunately, I can't change the latter, but overall this business has been, and I'll talk about that towards the end. But the budget's come. I will link a video in the description. I think it's from the Gosforth handyman, and I think his channel is the Small Business Toolbox or something like that, but I'll link the actual video in the back. If you want a bloke who's self-employed, catering to self-employed, telling you how the budget may or may not affect your business, that is the video for you. But as well, there's lots of things that's changing. You know, cash ISA rates dropping down from 20 to 12. I think you can still put some in the stocks and shares. You know, I think as well, if you listen to the Gosforth handyman's video, they're sort of peppering in things in the background which is going to pay off, you know, which isn't even talked, well, it's probably been talked about, but it's not been, you know, mainstream. And I do think within, you know, next few years, things are going to change. It's going to be a completely different landscape. But listen to his video and see what you think to that. My main worry was the VAT threshold being dropped, you know, down to 30. This is the thing. This is, you know, maybe I'm guilty for spreading it or talking about it. But I think a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. You know, a little bit of knowledge and a platform, this is where misinformation comes from. But at the same time, you shouldn't believe everything you see on the internet. You should take everything with a pinch of salt and do your own research. But I am kind of glad that they aren't doing this. Maybe in the future they will do it, I don't know. But the podcasts I've been listening to and, you know, from other people, it would be catastrophic for this country if they did bring the VAT threshold down. It would be huge detrimental, but anyway. So that's been and gone, really. I am looking towards next year as well. So one of the things I've done, and this is maybe something you guys can do, and I would definitely recommend this, is go out, buy a year planner or make your own, which is what I do. So I've got 2 sheets of A4 paper, folded it in half and then folded it into 3 pieces. So I've got 6 fold lines and I've drawn them in with marker pen, and I've stuck two of them together, so I've got 12 columns on 2 pages. And what that is my expenses for the year. So I've been through all my paperwork. So when my insurance comes out for this van, MOT, road tax, when all that comes out, that's been listed on that. So I know at a glance, you know, April's an expensive month, June's an expensive month, July's an expensive month. You get what I mean? And I think it's very important because, and this is why it's something I've always done, you've got to be looking ahead in this industry. You know, I think, you know, work in a month in hand, so to speak, or a couple of months is in, you know, save, put the money away and then invest. Don't think, oh well, I've got a good month this month, I'll buy all the tools I need, get all this sort of stuff, you know, because next month could be quiet or you could have an accident, anything can happen. But then you might think, oh well, I'm going to earn X amount next month, but if you've got your MOT, tax and insurance all in one month, you know, and they aren't cheap anymore, are they? Well, they've never been cheap, but you get what I mean. So yeah, just a sort of a little thing. I like certain things on paper, if I'm being honest with you. I like the tactile nature. I like the fact that you don't have to flick up on a phone, remember a password, you know, worry about it crashing. The only worry I've got is if I lose it. But anything like that, I put on a container wall, and again, as I go in, I can see these big bills coming, I can see these big outgoings coming, and I can plan for it a lot easier. So one of the things I've said to myself next season, so my 5-year plan is eventually, at the end of 5 years, to either be in a residential property, a commercial property. I still have the dream of buying a little plot of land and building on it and all that sort of stuff, maybe in that. But for the first year, 2 years definitely, I want to be in a position where I have got as much sort of savings and as much money behind me. So I'll still be investing in things, I'll still be purchasing equipment. I've got a big shopping basket screenshot and saved on equipment that I want to buy at the start of the season to get me ahead. So hopefully by the start of the season, all of my equipment will be warranted, and in theory I should have 2 years, 3 years of trouble-free, maintenance-free, issues. And in theory, everything that I hold, that I used on a day-to-day basis, and everything I push, I shouldn't have to rebuy. I'm happy with the mowers. I'm happy with the cordless kit. Don't get me wrong, if still brings something juicy out, something that makes my life easier, I'll buy it. But what I want to do is probably invest in that at the start of the season, and I want to have a couple of months off where everything I earn I'm putting into the tax pot, pension pot, personal pot. Well, not pension pot. Pension pot's last. Like I said, I want to use the next couple of years to boost my savings, the personal savings and the business savings as well. And the thing is, I've learnt this, and I've said this so many times now, money can't buy happiness, but it can buy a more pleasant form of misery. And one of the things I mean about that is some of the most stressful times I've had in my life has been when I've had big bills and I've not had the money to pay it. I hate it. I hate that feeling. I am a little bit of a warrior, and I do try and play things as cautiously as possible. But, you have a problem with your van, you get it fixed, and if you've got the money to get it fixed, you're all right. It's when you've got a problem with your van or a big bill coming and you haven't got the money, that's when things, start getting into a little bit of a pickle. Another thing as well, next season, I've said this now a couple of times, I keep going back and forward on whether to replace my van or buy, or to keep the van. I keep thinking, right, if I keep the van, I keep it as long as possible, then I'll upgrade it. Who knows is what's the best, really. I do think to myself, it's going to be I think it's better for the business in the long run to replace the van. So I think what I'm going to be doing next year is, like I said, I want to keep this van going as long as possible. I want to build my savings up as long as possible. And then probably, hopefully, if it lasts a year or most of a year, I'm a lot more comfortable, a lot more better off then. And then I can then start looking at, like I said, purchasing, a new van. Not purchasing, but financing it. And the thing is, so this old van of mine, I've had it for 10 years now. And, for me, my next van, I want it for another 10 years. So I don't want to be, buying something with like 50,000 miles and a couple of years old, because, one, I've always been told the first 10,000 miles is very important on the longevity of the van, and two, you don't know the history. You can guess at the history, but you don't know if it's been ragged or whatever, really. So I want to sort of, get something nice and then get it my way. And as well, I am looking forward, to getting a new van, because I've got some big ideas for it. I've got some really good ideas, and as such, you spend the money on the deposit, fine, but then I want to get the van up to scratch, as in add stuff to it to make it better for me. Remember, my van and your van, it's not just, for me, I want this van to be my mobile office. I want it to be a way of, where I can charge my batteries possibly. I want it to be racked out right. I want it to be set up right for me. I want everything in there what I need to run my business, like I've got now, and I am guilty of overloading my van, but everything I have in there, I'm ready to go. I can just grab it and use it. So I want to carry that off with the next van, and I've got some sort of ideas for it. Well, ideas and constraints, let's just say. So we'll be looking at getting something like that next season, I think. So, looking back at this season, there has been, like I said, there's been far more highs than there has been far more lows. I am very happy, so a little bit of me chat. I'm happy with how I've progressed, if I'm being honest with you. And I do like the word progression. I've talked about it in previous episodes. I feel a lot more healthier, a lot more better, in myself. Dare I say, more confident, I am thinking maybe next year probably is rebranding the business to SGM Property Maintenance. I feel that's more in line on what I can offer now. So you know, we can look after the whole property. You know, we can do the gutters, the fascias, the soffits, clean your windows, clean your conservatory. You know, we can work from the top down. We can do your garden. We can tackle big jobs, small jobs. You know, next year I want to be adding. So I'm having a big clear out of equipment. So everything that I sell, I'm putting into a separate pot, and I'm going to reinvest into tools. So maybe next year we can get the big flail mower. Maybe next year we can get, you know, a nice Grin, you know, top end commercial, you know, mulching mower. I know they aren't called mulching mowers, but you get what I mean. Maybe a rough cut mower, something that means that we can tackle these bigger jobs. So that's on the cards for next year. So like I said, I am debating whether to swap over to that, really. And you never know, it could be something, you know, something of, you know, where to go. You know, so I'm happy with that, happy with the weight loss, happy with where everything's going. The house clearances as well, even though they aren't set in stone, I think this year we've hit the record. I think I've done 5 this year, and I think the last 3 I've done solo. You used to have a couple of people helping me. The last 3 I've done solo, so I am happy with that, if I'm being honest with you. I miss the company, but at the same time, you do feel a lot. Like I said, I have missed the company, but at the same time, I feel a lot more productive within myself doing them. I feel like I can get stuff done a lot quicker, and as well, when you're on yourself, you've only got yourself to worry about. You can work as hard as you can, slow as you can, but ultimately as well, when you've got, you know, that money, it's all yours basically. It's all, you know. So yeah, we're happy with that. 5 house clearances done, and every single house clearance this season has gotten more efficient, more quicker, and better results. So I've carried this over to, you know, stuff within the business as well. So I went and purchased a load of flexi tubs, not the trugs like the builders trugs, but old school bins, you know, when people used to put rubbish in round bins, not wheelie bins. And they're like rubber, and they're really good. You can drag them, kick them, push them. They aren't too big that you can't lift them into a skip, but, you know, they're big enough to load stuff in. So I've been using them, and I take them gardening with me as well. So if I've got to, you know, instead of filling a ton bag, I fill that and then deposit that into the trailer or into the customer's bin. So again, you know, I bought a sack truck, I bought a furniture dolly, so, you know, you're moving this stuff easier. And this is what it should be all about. You know, you can't just do something at once and do it the same way for the rest of your life. You know, you've got to try things. You've got to think, oh, we'll try this. I used to black bag everything, and don't get me wrong, it was fine. You know, it's a portable way of moving stuff. But what ended up happening was the black bags would split. You know, you can't stack them right in the skip. And if you've got anything bulky or weird shaped or sharp, it'll burst it. And it just got where I think I was spending more time picking up the contents of a black bag. But these bins, like I said, everything's been going that lot quicker and a lot more efficient. And ultimately, that's what it's about. As I said, the house clearances aren't set in stone. This is why I'm trying to spend as little money on that side of the business. How it looks, that side of the business is probably the most profitable, but it's also the one where it's not certain. I cannot say how many house clearances I'll get next year. If my, you know, lead source is, you know, the person who gets them for me, if she leaves, if she changes department, that's gone. And as such, when I do house clearances, I try and fill empty days, rain days, or even weekends with it, because I don't want to be chipping away or, you know, winding up my existing customers or moving them for the sake of something that's not guaranteed in the long run. So I'm happy with the customers. I said this a few times in videos this season. There's been customers this year that have caused problems last year. This year they've been as good as gold. And I know why, but I won't say it. It's change of priorities. Basically, things have happened in their lives that forces their attention onto other things. But then there's been customers this season that have caused problems that I never thought would cause problems. There's been an outlier where I've had a few customers say to me that, so they've reduced visits, they've cut back visits, they've finished the season early, and they started late. And their reason for doing that was their pensions have been changed. And I think it's 2 customers or 3 customers that have said the exact same thing. Now I know my customers, I know my tight customers, and I know customers that aren't tight. And if they aren't tight and they're saying that to me, something's going on with the pensions, like I said. But as I said, even with all of this good, I do think, I'm trying not to make it morbid, I do think it's going to get harder running your business as we get further into things. Like I said, change is afoot. I think this Make Tax Digital is going to shock a few people when it comes to this. I'm still speaking to people that, they're completely unaware of it. I did actually have a letter off HMRC telling me that my books need to be submitted through this Make Tax Digital. Well, I found it quite annoying really, because I received that letter a couple of weeks ago and they need to be submitted digitally in April. But anyway, like I said, maybe I'm missing a trick, or maybe I'm missing a thing, I don't know. I listened to a podcast, and I will link it's not a podcast, it was a YouTube live, and he had his accountant on, and his accountant was talking about Make Tax Digital, so I'll link that as well. And that actually was it's about 2 hours long, but stick with it because there's some bloody good information in there. And what this chap does is he actually breaks down the Make Tax Digital, and it's as bad as you think it is, but it's not as bad as you think it is, if you get what I mean. So I'll link that as well in the show notes. So I've got a couple more jobs to do tomorrow, and then that's going to be it for this November. And it's been a really good November. Christmas time. So I said at the start of the podcast, I like to break up about a week before Christmas. I've got to do the Christmas card drop again, and I've also got to do the biscuits and jam drop as well. So I found a lady who'll make me some jam, and I'm going to buy some more biscuits on Ringtons. And I'll be honest with you, as sad as this sounds, it's one of my favouriteest times a year. If you're of the disposition that customers get enough off you during the season, you probably won't like this next bit. But I do believe in saying thank you to all of my customers. Like I said, every single customer gets a card, and every single customer gets a gift, whether it's a pot of jam, whether it's a pack of biscuits. I treat everybody the same. My commercial clients and the big clients, they get a hamper, whether it's a biscuit hamper or something like that, or a Thornton's hamper. Like I said, I do believe in, this is the thing, I'd love to be able to give all of my customers Thornton's hampers, but alas, I can't afford it. But at the same time, it is the thought that counts. But when you've got customers that are paying, singularly 20% of your turnover, I do believe in rewarding that, let's just say. I also think as well, if you build up a little bit of rapport and you build trust with people, they leave you alone. Another thing that I do is, so all of the suppliers in my area, so the compost guy, where I buy my compost and gravel, where I buy all my plants, and the guy that I buy the mulch and the bark chippings from, I go to each of them, and I just go to Morrison's or Tesco's, and I buy the drums of sweets that are always shrinking, and I'll go to each one of them and I'll just give them a couple of tins of Celebrations or miniature heroes. That's not so much to win favour with the boss of that place. What it's there for is actually for the staff, because all of them people, they help me carry plants to my van, they help me carry bags of compost to my van. If I'm buying 10 bags of gravel and they're lumping 5 of them. And what it does is, I like to think, oh yeah, that guy's, he's alright, he gave us some sweets last year. So like I said, just, buy a little bit of favour. Same with the gifts as well. I worked it out one year. It cost me roughly about £4 to £5 per customer. So obviously, this year I have got quite a lot of customers. So it's probably going to be like £200, £300. but well, more than that with the hampers. But when I look at what I've earned this season, I think it's an acceptable price, really. I am thinking of dropping. They've naturally dropped off, so my hourly customers now are shrinking. I dropped one the other day, well, not the other day, about a couple of months ago. He, without sounding rude, he just got to be a pain in the arse. Overly demanding, changing his mind, nothing was right. You should have come tomorrow, you should have come next week, can you come next week, you turn up next week, don't need you now. A lot's going on, and to be fair, he has had a lot going on, but this is something that does wind me up. As I can understand you've got a lot going on, but if you're moaning to me that the garden's getting at you, but yeah, I'm willing to come and, you know, it's not an ideal time for you, then what am I to do? And in the end, we ended up having a conversation where I just told him it's not working anymore. You know, and you've got to sometimes, you've just got to walk away from customers, because otherwise you just turn into their punching bag, you know, where nothing's right, and I don't want that. So I've got some jobs booked in for December, YouTube content wise, so I've got some videos in the pipeline. They're all edited, they're all uploaded to YouTube. I just need to thumbnail and do all that little bit and schedule it. Podcast wise, I am, part of what I want to do over the winter is to go in person to speak to a couple of gardeners and do some podcast episodes with them. I'm also going to speak to another podcast, but in the exterior cleaning world, and do an episode with them, and vice versa. So I'm looking forward to that, if I'm being honest. That'll be a nice little road trip. So yeah, there's plenty coming up. I want to get in a container, so I've got a couple of container-based videos coming out. I've got a couple of review videos that I want to be doing. I think what I'm going to do is, with one video, I think I'm going to go through. I think I'm going to review, instead of like reviewing each piece of cordless equipment, I'm just going to do like a mega video where it's like, right, this is me reviewing the AP battery platform from Still. And then, because I've got so much of it, I can show you what works and what doesn't work on it, and what's good and what's bad on it, and what to look out for as well. I want to do a review on the Artesia. Even though you can't buy them anymore, it's still relevant, because that's one of the big things from this season, is finding the Artesia mower and using the Artesia mower. It genuinely has been a game changer for the business. I can see why professional gardeners use them and move over to them and stick with them, because they are a good mower, they really are. As I said, for next season, I've got my eyes on some, you know, bigger pieces of equipment. I keep looking at those big grin mulching mowers. I've got eyes on maybe getting a bigger trailer for next season. A tipping trailer though, because I'm sick of emptying the one I've got by hand. It's a ball ache. And it's turned into one of my most hated jobs. So my trailer at the moment, and I probably still will do this, so I'll keep my trailer that I've got and probably buy a tipping trailer. But one of the things I use my trailer for is just rubbish. So whenever I do a garden tidy up and I've got a bag of rubbish, I'll just throw it in the trailer, and I'll just do one trip a month or one trip every 2 months. But I don't know whether it's like the sadomasochist in me that makes me do this. I will always do it when it's a rain day. So if I've got nothing on, I think, I'll go and empty the trailer. And invariably, what ends up happening is where I take my rubbish, it just turns into a swamp. It's got this really thin, horrible, like wood, like it's like water and mud mixed. It's like the thinnest mud you've ever seen. And what it does is it just clings to everything. So if you're emptying a ton bag, you're dragging it and it's horrible. It's absolutely vile. I can't stand it. So every time I do it, I always end up getting soaked. I always get up really dirty. And as such, it's sort of like, that's like my Vietnam. I just can't stand it. So anyway, we've all got a cross to bear, haven't we? So I think getting something like a tipping trailer would make that where it's less of a chore, let's just say. And other than that, I want to keep doing with what I've been doing this season. And this is something I've been very happy with, is working and then going away, working and then going away. Towards the end of the season, I haven't been out as much as I wanted to, because, you know, I'm not turning work away, and I've been taking extra jobs on. I've been working weekends, I've been working 6-7 days. It's with the idea, especially when it's like that in October and November, because you know you're not going to get much more work, you take it on. So again, you know, that's sort of at the background really. But next year, it's like I said, it'll start again. We'll be going out and about, we'll exploring and doing things. So I'm going to leave this episode here now, guys, and as usual, keep on gardening.